Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. How y'all doing? My name is John Belkowitz. I'm the CTO over here at Intelligent Concrete, and we've got an exciting how to read a technical paper. And if this is the first time that you're joining us for how to read a technical paper, this is where we dive into a technical paper and try and uncover the practical lessons for our listeners out of the paper. What we also do is we grade the paper too, just for the sake of copyright. We're not showing you all the language in the copy from the paper, but what we are doing is I'm throwing my notes in there. So yeah, this was a great paper from Concrete International, and this is their July 2023 edition. And this is like all the way in the back end of the publication, which it shouldn't be. It should be in the front. This is their concrete Q&A. And what we're looking at today is hard troweling, air, and concrete. And that's from Concrete International. So as always, we have our, what do you call this? This overview, critical path, what we're going to be doing. If you don't get these things answered, then ask for your money back. I think this is free though, so yeah. So why do we care? Well, as we will go into, this is one of the most discussed, most heated argument in the concrete industry, especially with the contractors. And that is using steel on exterior concrete, or more so concrete with air in it. And why do we care? We don't care for, or we do care for what are not trivial reasons. There are real reasons, and those reasons are we're creating an environment where the concrete is just going to be subpar. It's not going to be as good as it was designed and delivered, designed, batch, delivered. And this is something that can be easily fixed with a change of practice or a change in the state of the practice. Because at one point we were doing it correctly, and now we're not doing it correctly. And I am definitely on a side. I pick a side, and I stay on that side. And what I want to do is I want to identify these takeaways from each section that persuade you to this side. And part of that is distinguishing shit work from good work, because as it turns out, I read a peer-reviewed journal last week that I'm contemplating on how to send a complaint to them that they need better editorial staff, because they just did a crap job, and the paper that went through was just a worthless paper. And such a good periodical too. Anyway, I'm getting off topic here. So where do we go from here? What I also try to incorporate in my notes is how do we use this? Now that we find this information out, where do we go from here? Now, I think this, of all papers, this one that folks don't have many excuses when it comes to reading and reviewing it. This is a very easy paper. Very short paper. It's very well written. It's probably one of my favorite papers from the ACI staff. Bravo. They just came out with another one. I'm going to read that one today, but really was easy to get the where do we go from here. This is an aha moment, which I consider some of the wisest professionals in the field. So I love the title too. A hard look at hard troweling of Entrained concrete. Finally addressing, and these are my notes, finally addressing one of the biggest disagreements in the construction and concrete industry. So the question came in, and this is what I blurted out over here. Blurred out? Anyway. Great freaking paper. Please buy the issue and read this. So the question was, I'm working on a project that requires hard troweling of air-entrained concrete. Will hard troweling of concrete with air content below 3% or using combo blades on concrete with an air content exceeding 3% prevent blister formation and delaminations. There are so many directions that you can go with that question. Where I lived and where I worked throughout the Western U.S. business unit, with the freeze thaw, the wetting and drying cycles, and the freeze thaw, the de-icing salts and brine, and the wetting and drying, and the freeze thaw, and the abrasion. We wanted to create a concrete surface that was the first line of defense to this physical and chemical attack. And what that means is not just starting out with a great concrete product, but also starting out with correct practices. And of course, you would have great concrete where we all toiled and worked hard to make sure we got quality product out. And then we get contractors who use a practice that is going to cause the concrete, and there's no discussion of method, and this is what I've been doing. If that's your argument, I've done it for 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, 40 years, it's a weak argument because just you can't go against the laws of physics. We're good at what we do, but when you take air, well, anyway, let's get into this. All right, a little bit of a teaser. All right, so this article, like I said, was really short. We're talking 2 pages here. And it starts off with this question that everybody has heard in some form, fashion, or they've heard I've been doing this, like I just said. But what I really like about this author, and this person starts out with a warning from 4 different associations. Now, what I often hear from a contractor is engineers don't know what the hell they're talking about. Scientists don't know what the hell they're talking about. Let them leave the job site and we'll do what we know what to do. We've been trained to do, and that's hard troweling the concrete, even if it has air in it. And what I like about this paper is after it goes through the association warnings, that's where, especially giving you a very specific number, which I oftentimes think is a dangerous thing to do, but in a situation like this, you can give that number a factor of safety. You can say, well, I'm going to go a little bit lower, 2.5%. Well, I'm not going to go above 2.9%. Well, on my job sites, I can push 3.2%. It's really up to you, because you as the contractor, you're always going to have to deal with the ramifications for your decisions, no matter whether you agree or disagree. What I love about this paper is not that it just goes into the warning. It's the get you scared, so it draws you into the paper, but then it dives directly into the definitions. We keep using these terms like hard troweling or power finishing, and there's some unspoken axioms or terms that we're not all agreeing on. So if I say hard troweling, somebody might push back and say, well, I don't use, or I don't, they might refer to the how do they put in here, the level of effort, when in actuality what we're talking about is the type of equipment that you're using. And the etymology of hard troweling, again, doesn't go back to the level of effort that's put in there, but it goes back to the material that was used, which was a hard quenched steel. So originally what the specification might have included was finished with hardened steel trowel blades, and that might have evolved to provide hardened steel trowel finish, and then that could have evolved to provide hard trowel finish, and then that could have evolved to hard troweling, and so forth. So, a lot of times people say, well, I'm using a steel blade, but I'm not putting a lot of effort into it. And, well, it doesn't really matter because, I'm just doing a little bit, and I'm just using it on the edges. And as it turns out, what we're talking about, the hard troweling, is using that type of material. It's also the geometry. Because folks that say, well, I'm not using blades, I'm just using pans or floats, it's still the upturn of the pans, the upturn of the floats that will create an environment that is conducive for this delamination and flaking. And the limitation, and a lot of these limitations, a lot of these axioms that are coming out in this paper, that there's a lot of, as you'll see, references, and that's how good you can tell a paper is the level of effort they went into to get the references to back up their ideas, so there would be credibility to what they're saying. So always go to the references while you're reading to see, are they referencing good work, or are they referencing crap work? And, garbage in equals garbage out. What I also like about this paper is not only do they give you the boundary conditions, like, hey, when you're working with not just exterior concrete, because you could be in California and exterior concrete doesn't have air entraining in it, or an air entraining agent in there. You could be working with, Michigan concrete, where, exterior concrete, the assumption is it's 5.5% or 4.5% up. So what I love about this paper is they give boundary conditions about your level of risk with finishing using a hard trowel, or a hardened steel trowel, or something of the like. And I don't want to steal the thunder from this paper, but they really don't give you any reason not to follow these rules. There are some great rules in here that everybody can make money off of, and my suggestion is to print this out and to leave a copy of this in your truck, especially this last paragraph right here, where it goes into the once the lamination starts happening. Read that, internalize that. My dog just came in here to open the door, and then he just walked out. Okay, so the last page here, I really like this last page. It's got some great takeaways. The first takeaway is there's a case study where the author creates an analysis of an interior concrete finisher that does exterior work to make money on the off season for interior work. And they don't change their equipment or their state of the practice. And inherently, which I understand it, but once they start using concrete with air in it, this is where the problems are created. And I didn't go into that, and I was saving this, what is the problem? The problem is when, and I'm reading directly, I love the way the author wrote this. When manipulating the surface with any type of modern power finishing equipment, whether using a pan float, float shoes, combined blades, or trowel blades, the tiny air voids tend to coalesce, and coalesce means come together from a smaller form into a larger form, coalesce into larger voids that can become flattened and elongated under repetitive passes of the equipment. And the author goes into it a little bit deeper here, that when doing so, final finishing shouldn't be with this type of equipment, but it should be with a broom finish or a burlap sack, but something that really opens up the surface and keeps that air package intact. And maybe there's a little bit of an ad hominem, this attacking the people and not the argument from the author. But I think that's fair. There's frustration from both sides, the architects, the engineers, the scientists, and the finishers alike. What I really love, LOVE, about the last the last paragraph is a CYA from the author. It's, covering the ass of, hey, there's other factors that can cause the lamination or flaking. It's the second to the last paragraph where he calls out the finishers that are not heeding this advice, and he says that they are riding the edge. It's true, and I hear it often, and I'm going to hear it on this, that, well, I've been doing this the same way and you can't tell me because I've never had a problem on a job site. And, I would challenge people to go back to their job sites. I would challenge people who said, well, I use this on I never have a problem on my edges, and I use edgers all the time, and they're only steel. And both of those are not the case. More than likely, your job sites have had problems because concrete, even if it's placed perfectly, it's an imperfect material, such as life. And most of our problems start at our joints where we use, or our edges where we use, that type of equipment, that steel or hardened steel equipment. So, I do want to challenge folks who push back on this, and the author does too by saying that they're riding the edge. Just love this paper, as you can tell. So, positive takeaways from this. A lot of information that can start helping you make money now on the job site. Why do we care? Concrete gets a lot of flack. For some reason, asphalt doesn't have to deal with this as much, the deterioration of the surface, but concrete gets a lot of flack for, the wear and tear that we see due to physical and chemical attack. A lot of that is de-icing, salts and brines, freezing and thawing, wetting and drying cycles. What we're trying to do here especially is help out the industry. This is a hot topic, to say the least, and it has caused many lawsuits, many of a concrete driveway, despite the fact that it has not failed, still being replaced earlier than it was intended to be. And the paper itself, this 1.5, 1 3/4 paper, was well written, extremely palatable for the industry on a 3rd to 8th grade reading level, wherever you find yourself. And by the way, most engineers consider themselves at an 8th grade reading level. So I think this was written for engineers, architects, contractors, ready-mix suppliers. It's a freaking amazing paper. I only had to look up 2 or 3 words, and I'm not trying to make fun of myself, but as it turns out, I don't know every word in the world, and it's okay if you have to, when you're reading these papers, sit there with Wikipedia or a dictionary sitting right next to you. It's a fast and easy read. You should, let me make sure. How do we identify the takeaways? I feel like I included the takeaways here. But let me wrap it up for you. We need to do a better job to take care of our concrete. Whether we're talking about pavements for commercial or parking aprons or residential driveways or sidewalks for parks or residential areas, the top surface of concrete, which is that first line of defense, is failing at an unprecedented rate, and it could be blamed on this mass exodus of the artisans that have been placing concrete for decades, and we have a newer, unseasoned crew out there on a global scale. And it can also be blamed on the inferior concrete that we have as of late because of a lot of different factors. This paper is easy and fast to read, and it's good for all concrete job titles that I've listed. So where do we go from here? Well, put it into practice. What I'm saying, what the author is saying, is change your practice based off of the type of concrete that you're using. If you're working with exterior concrete, do an experiment in your own yard. Don't allow yourself to use steel on top of that concrete that you're practicing with. And, folks, they did it for a really long time before they started creating hardened steel equipment, finishing equipment, and it worked really flipping well. And it turns out concrete that was made in the 30s, 40s, and 50s sometimes outlast the concretes that were made in the 2015s and the 2020s. So, overall, I give this concrete paper an A+. If I could, I would give it an A++. I would say that this is required reading for everybody, but I don't believe this is free. I believe you need a membership to get this article. Thanks for joining us. Let me know if you have any concrete questions, concrete concerns, especially about this article, and challenge yourself. Read this paper. It was an easy and enjoyable read. I recommend it for all audiences in the concrete industry. Thanks for joining. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out our other forms of communication out there, to include our YouTube channel, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. Thanks for joining us again, y'all. Have a great day. Go concrete! Beat asphalt.